Hi, everyone. Good to see you. Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit about science, but I'm going to start with a little background that might be a little bit remedial for this group, because if you're here at South by Southwest, you're probably familiar with large language models. But to make a large language model, you basically show it all of the internet. Millions of books, billions of websites, and it discovers how people think and speak because it's able to make associations between what it sees, what you've shown it. You can ask it a question in plain English, and most of the time, it gives you a pretty good answer. It's been amazing to see this happen over the past few years. But what if you took that AI model and instead of showing it all the information that people have put out into the world, what if instead you pointed it inwards and showed it what's inside each one of us? What if you showed an AI model 3D images of the human heart at an atomic level? What if you showed it videos of individual cells interacting with other cells? What if you taught it the molecular code and all the structures inside every one of your cells? What you would get is a powerful simulation of how the human cell works. And at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, we call that the virtual cell model. And we think a virtual cell model would completely change the way we understand health and medicine. We know a little bit about cells. For the non-biologists in here, let's do a little background. Remember, cells, they are the smallest unit of life. If you remember high school biology, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. DNA, that lives in the nucleus. But I'm not exaggerating when we understand some more, but not that much more about how a cell works. There's a lot happening. There are trillions and trillions of cells. It's really hard to study those individual components of the cell, and it's nearly impossible to understand how those components come together for a functioning system. And the wet lab, in the lab, we can only zoom in on the tiniest of windows. So we need the large language model, and we need these digital simulations to be able to understand how the smallest unit of life actually comes together and creates us. The hope is then, with those models, we'll be able to answer some of the hardest questions in biology. How do we, from a single genome, create neurons and fingernails? How do we know which cells are the same and which ones are different? What does each gene actually do? And what happens when there's errors in them? And how do those trillions of cell types come from a single fertilized egg to make each one of your unique selves? Those are the deepest, oldest questions in human biology. And if a virtual cell can help us answer those questions, we will be so much closer to actually cure and preventing disease, heart disease, neurodegeneration, cancer, maybe all disease. So I want to take the next hour or so to imagine if every scientist and physician had access to a virtual cell model, what would they do? How would life change for all of us? I'll share 3 quick ideas right now, and then Emily and I will get into it for the rest of the hour. The first idea, I think, is everyone's natural instinct. I want to know about me. We live in an age of personalization. My algorithm knows I like pop music, skiing, and stand-up comedy. And so I expect it to treat me as an individual, and I would be really disappointed if we all shared the same reels. But right now, because of how hard it is to do science, that's basically what happens. We study a very small and limited number of samples, and we extrapolate from there to everyone else, whether or not they are represented in the original sample set. But if we build the right data and AI models, we can better understand what specifically keeps each one of us healthy and what makes each one of us sick. So here's what we're working at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. Build a virtual cell that can understand the variations across the genome. Use it to predict the unique physiology of each one of our bodies. Learn about what health problems we're susceptible to and how we will uniquely respond to different types of interventions. My doctor would want that. I would want that. That brings me to the next idea, which is discovering new treatments. Right now, the drug discovery process is incredibly difficult. It usually takes decades of trial and error and billions of dollars of investment. And even the successes, they can be derailed by terrible side effects. Side effects that are discovered way too far into the drug discovery process because we just don't understand how the drugs affect non-target tissues and organs. And that process completely misses patients of rare disease, whose populations are so small that the math simply doesn't pencil out for research and drug development. A virtual cell changes that equation. Rather than testing candidate molecules one by one in the lab, you can model the disease in the software. You can test 1 million potential therapies. You can screen out drugs that don't reach your target tissue, that aren't commercially viable, and that harm other tissues. And in the end of the process, you have a handful of really promising candidates to test in the lab. And in that world, you can compress years of work into days. Your success rate goes way up, and the costs, hopefully, go way down. You can develop more drugs for patients, and those drugs, probably for most diseases, will be way better. And I know that's exciting. And on that note, this is the one I'm actually most excited about. Here's another idea. The most powerful defense system for ourselves is not actually drugs. It's actually the human immune system. We usually think about it as a way that we fight off bacteria or viruses, but it actually does so much more. No other drug therapy comes close. But even our immune system has limits. Oftentimes, detecting certain types of tumor cells is really hard because it evades our human immune system. Tumors hide from it. And so by the time we develop symptoms, the damage is oftentimes significant and irreversible. But you know how large language models can write poems? What if we could use it to engineer a new type of cell? You could say this: I need a cell that can roam in my body and detect if there are signs of a certain type of tumor. And if it does detect that type of tumor, can you write that into the cell's own code so that information has been recorded? That technology actually already exists. We just need to build it in a targeted way. So with a large language model, you could reverse engineer that immune cell that you're looking for, step by step, gene by gene. And you could go even further. You could give an engineered cell the power to both go in and detect the disease and then go in and take care of it. That would put us in a world where we aren't just trying to treat disease when it's out of control. We're actually preventing it at the earliest stages. No one knows for sure if this is possible. That's the disclaimer. But I think my bold claim is that we can be in this future in the next 20 years, and a lot of it in the next 10 years. The reason I believe this is because health and medicine, it moves in leaps. There are decades when research gets stuck. And then someone invents a new technology that completely changes how we see the human body. And it gives us a stark before and after. And I believe we're in the process of moving between that before state and the after state. And I have such strong conviction in that because it has happened over and over again in history. My favorite example, the microscope. Before the microscope, we could see what we could see with the naked eye and look for patterns. Afterwards, we could actually see microorganisms. We could see the smallest bits that make you who you are, and we could do something about it. We understood a lot more about health. X-rays and MRIs, they allowed us to see inside a living body. And then the DNA sequence revolution gave us the blueprint of life. All those technologies put us in a stark state of before and after. And I believe virtual cells can be a breakthrough technology just like those. And at CZI, we've built some early models. I'm biased, but I believe that we are set up to give scientists new tools to see the world completely differently. And they're going to be able to look at the world and understand the cellular basis of health and disease. Right now, so much is a mystery. Why do millions of us wake up with chronic pain? What really causes depression? I think we're the generation, the first people in history, who get a chance to actually find out and do something about it. I'm excited to talk more about how we get from here to there. So help me welcome Emily Chang to the stage.
Awesome. I'm so excited. So excited to talk more about how we get from here to there. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about how you got from there to here.
Okay.
A little bit about your journey, because it is, I think, for those who don't know, a really fascinating story. You were a full-time pediatrician.
Yep.
And you and Mark got advice to start your philanthropy early on, and that turned out to be a really pivotal conversation. We can all imagine how hard it is to become a doctor, sleepless nights, you give so much of your life just to get there.
Yep.
You decided to quit and do this full time. What compelled you to do that?
Okay, so, sleepless nights for sure. I think a lot of you know a little bit about my family. Little asymmetric, you know who my husband is. But he's actually not the most important person you need to know to understand who I am. The most important people in my life to understand who I am today are actually my grandparents. My grandparents, both before my parents got together, they knew each other. And we were Chinese families living in Vietnam, and the Vietnam War struck. And they were stuck and they needed to leave the country. And the only way out for them, the only thing that was available, was to put their kids on these rickety little boats and float out to the South China Sea, hoping for a better life. Mm-hmm. And these boats would sink. And so they were like, we got to de-risk the situation. We can't, they would hear about whole families sinking. And so they were like, okay, we're going to split up. We're going to buddy up our kids between each family. And so everyone would have a buddy, but if the boat sank, they would only lose one or two children. And I'm not a helicopter parent, but my heart drops when they get out of the car in the parking lot before me. So I just can't imagine what that would feel like or be like. But they did it. And I think the thing that
everyone made it okay.
Everyone made it, sorry. Don't want to leave you guys on suspense. Sure. Everyone made it. But the thing that I want to make sure, I hope is in my DNA and is actually in my children's DNA, is the belief that there's a future out there, the optimism and the audacity to say no, there's got to be something better, and it's worth working hard for, risking sort of real good things in life for. And they did that for my parents, and here I am, which is wild. Separate story, we don't have time for that. But the idea that there's something so much better to strive for, which is what sort of, I think, made me restless when I was like, there's more to do. And I'm excited to be a part of that.
Yeah. And I love seeing you get emotional when you tell that story, and you can tell that this work really means a lot to you. You're coming up now on the 10-year anniversary of CZI. I think this is the longest job you've ever had.
It is. I've held down a job for officially 9.5 years. I feel pretty good about it.
And the mission has changed over the years. What was it when you started, and what is it today?
When we started, Mark and I were it was this overwhelming urge when Max was born. It was oh my God, we can't put this off. The future has to become better, and we need to be part of that, because it was that urge of there's kids coming now, now what?
Wasn't he wordsmithing the blog post when you were in labor or something?
Yes, and he had a few more edits, and I was like, I have to push. You have to stop now. But we had this overwhelming desire to give back, and we had skills. We're builders. He's a builder. I've been working in the field with families and children my whole life. And so we're okay, we have skills. We can give back. We can do something. But it turns out that at the beginning, we were kind of teenagers or college freshmen who were there's so many classes, there's so many choices, so many good things to do in the world. What should we do? And we tried on a lot of things. But our goal was we wanted to help people live better lives. And it was about a few years in when we realized that we had a really unique fit for basic science research. It was a passion of mine from taking care of patients, actually. And there was such a compelling need and match for where biology is today, and our ability as an organization to build organizations, take on big risks, build technology, and it's been super exciting ever since.
Can you explain how you approach your work? Because you're not just writing checks.
No.
Right? And a lot of what you are doing is informed by your time as a doctor at UCSF.
Yeah. So let me start with the second half of your question, which is a lot of people think we work in medicine or healthcare delivery because I am a pediatrician. And I have to remind people, in fact, we work in basic science research. And that means understanding the beginning, the biology part, how cells work, and how your body comes together, and what's actually happening inside at a cellular molecular level. And that's because when I trained as a pediatrician, I would walk into rooms. I was at UCSF where we took care of a lot of sick kids, a lot of times with things that didn't have a name or didn't have a treatment, and all they would hand me is a stapled packet of paper, and they were this is everything we know about this disease. And in training, I would be okay, let me read this. And I would just scour through the paper, and I'd be what does this mean? What does this mean? But the truth is, every single word mattered, because that was all we had to take care of that kid. There was nothing more. And every single word, I was I need to know more about this. What does this mean? And that printed PDF was that family's entire hope, that I could somehow take that PDF and interpret it to mean something for them and to help them with a real problem they had. And that's when I learned basic science research is where hope is going to come from.
Right.
like healthcare delivery is important to take care of people, but if we don't invest in basic science research, there is no future hope. And that's sort of why it gets so nerdy about everything else we'll talk about today. That's how we first got interested, and we've always done a few things. We do traditional grant making, which means we write checks to scientists all over the country, all over the world, that are working on issues related to what we're working on. But we actually do most of our work at this point first party. CZI, we run 4 research institutes. We call them biohubs. We have an AI research team. We have a software development team that all comes together to work on really understanding the mysteries of the cell.
So, and you alluded to this, but technology obviously moves super fast. Biology and science do not. And I'm sure it's frustrating how quickly tech can move, but the medical industry, healthcare, just doesn't seem to change that quickly. Is AI going to finally be the thing that supercharges that? Like, is that going to be the gasoline on the fire?
So I think the thing that's a bit interesting in medical research is that there's lots of innovative labs and innovative researchers, but they're fully decentralized, right? Like, none of you can name the big biology labs, neither can I, but you can name the large tech companies that are building those large language models. And the reason is because with the decentralization, there is a ton of innovation, but it sort of lives locally in an individual lab. And they don't have the scale or resources when they have a software breakthrough, they've built a cool model, they don't have the ability to scale something to sort of meet the needs of the entire scientific community. And that's a lesson a pattern that we noticed, and we said, oh, we could do something about this, because we're sort of zoomed out a little bit, and we have the ability to build scalable software, bring standards and tools for the entire scientific community. So a little bit of a niche that we filled at CZI is like finding all those cool bright spots that sometimes never get the scale or the ability to share with the broader community. We can be a part of building and sharing that so that progress moves faster. And I want to also, the healthcare and research are 2 different things. And I don't make any promises for healthcare, but research, like I said, I think we're on the precipice of doing something incredibly cool.
So I got to go wake surfing with you and Mark in Tahoe,
Yes.
and I made a fool of myself and they shredded. That's what happened. But that is where we started geeking out about virtual cells, and I didn't realize that this is CZI's biggest moonshot. Like, so we heard the presentation.
Yeah.
Like, are you saying you can make an exact digital copy of me and use it to test anything that I might need, any medicine I might need to take, figure out any disease I might get? Like,
hopefully. So, I truly think this virtual cell can be like a before and after. Because right now, like, we really sort of we have very limited models to understand, like, how your body works specifically, and to be able to sort of do something about it. And let me step back. You have kids, I have kids. So I'm going to use an analogy that hopefully lots of people here will understand on why this solving mysteries of the cell is so important. So genome, like most people here, remember the Human Genome Project. You can get your genome read out. And that's the blueprint for how you are unique and you are you. But if we use a Lego example, okay, people here have built Legos. You get in the new, not when we were younger where you do generic stuff. You're building cool stuff these days, right?
What do you do with all that stuff once it's built, by the way?
Oh yeah.
You've got a lot of those.
Okay, but one of the coolest Legos you can build is the Millennium Falcon. So put that in your imagination. Like imagine
I've got that one.
You've got, did you finish it?
Yeah, my son finished it.
Okay,
Yeah.
So you've done that.
He's done it.
Your body is the Millennium Falcon plus plus. And your genome is, or it's just instructions on how to make Legos. It's not even all the Legos you need to make the project. So you go from your genome being like, here's how you make Legos. And then we actually don't know very much about all the way to like, and here's the Millennium Falcon. Like, that gap is that big, okay? And so like, think about like when you get sick, it's the version of being like, these two parts don't come together. You've been there, right? Why? We don't know why. And there's so many steps. We have to go from your genome to RNA to proteins, to those proteins coming together in complexes to form a cell, for that cell to come together to form a tissue and an organ. That's a lot of information. And historically, like, we just like haven't been able to like really look deeply. But in the past 20 years, we've had new technologies come online, and you've all heard about them. CRISPR, mass spec, DNA sequencing, deep imaging. Like, we can do all that. And we've started to generate data sets around this, describing that big gap between Lego and Millennium Falcon. But it's been a bit of like, okay, like we have all this data, but what does it mean? We don't want to build the data if we can't pull the insights out of it. And so there's been a little bit of hesitancy, but with the ability to use large language models to make sense of this data and to put it in context and to tell us how this cell actually comes together when we have all this information, that is super powerful. And we can like really understand like the mystery of how life comes together from the genome.
So is this going to be like the ChatGPT moment for biology?
I think it's going to be an ability to build a model that allows scientists to ask a lot of scientific questions. But it's going to be the hypothesis generator. It's going to allow scientists to say, yeah, there's something there. I want to understand that. It's a tool to make all the wet lab, because you want to verify all of this. It's a tool to make every scientist, like supercharge every scientist's brain. And then at CZI, we've had experience, like I said, a lot of data. Like, please don't tell that to anyone who's working on large language models. Like, I didn't mean it in that way. We have a lot of data for the biology world. Compared to what you need to actually feed to large language models for them to actually like be fully utilized, biology is tiny. So we need to generate more data. And at CZI, we have experience doing that. For one of the things I'm most proud of is we've been part of building one of the largest single-cell data sets describing more than 100 million cells. Again, big for biology, small in AI. But we have the ability to do so much more. And with our research institutes, the biohubs, we have the ability to choose and carefully cultivate the specific data sets we want that can show us the different contours of the cell. And we also, at CZI, we have one of the largest nonprofit life sciences GPU clusters. So we can really support modern computation on these models. So it's a really exciting nexus of all the different parts of the CZI community that we've been able to do internally and with partners all over the country.
Now, one of the hopes is that this will lead to truly personalized medicine.
Yep.
But as we were discussing earlier, so many people, it seems, struggle to get like the most basic care. Like, what is the dream scenario? If this works, what does truly personalized medical care look like?
So I think the way we have to, I want us to come to expect and to be able to live in the next 10, 20 years is that the doctor really knows you. And it's not just on their best guess. And I mentioned depression at the beginning, but I really think depression is many diseases that we've sort of bundled up in one. I don't think it is one disease. And right now, if you go to see a doctor, they'll say like, look, Zoloft works well for a lot of my patients. And why don't you try it? Meanwhile, depression is an incredibly serious, high morbidity and mortality disease. And the best guess we have right now is like, take this commonly used drug and let's hope it works for you. If not, a few weeks, maybe a month later, we'll switch. That's like precious time where there's a lot of human suffering. Like, I want us to expect that your doctor can understand you, look at your genetic code and how your body works, and say, you have this gene, you have this variant of this gene. I know that this drug you're going to respond the best to. But I also know that this is a side effect that you can anticipate based on who you are. Like, that is a super empowering conversation that is personalized to you, is relevant to you, and will help you actually get the best care in a timely manner. And I don't think, today's large language models are going to get us there. But I think applying the large language models to the way that we understand biology will get us there, because all the parts are there. We just have to put them together.
What are the risks to AI being applied or turbocharging biology? I mean, AI still gets a lot of stuff wrong, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about our health information and precious time. What do you think the biggest challenges are?
In biology, we're looking at cells, not humans yet. It's not going to give us the full answer. I don't want you to think that scientists are just going to talk to a model and get all the information that they need. Because a lot of things still, like, there's a huge leap between the lab and like what happens in a living being. And also, like, we have solved diabetes so many times in mice, like not in humans. So there's a translational gap, okay? But it's gonna make us so much faster and more efficient and more effective. And so we should expect that we speed up the rate of discovery, but these models are gonna make mistakes. They're not going to be perfect. They're gonna give us imagined ideas that aren't sort of real and don't play out in a biological system. That is to be expected. But we have to be able to use it to make us better.
You've now got these biohubs across the country, and you're working on a lot of different moonshots, actually.
Yeah.
I've talked to Sam Altman about holy shit moments, of which there seem to be many in AI. What's been your biggest holy shit moment lately?
This is what makes this work so fun. This just happened this week. I actually have some colleagues here where we talked about, shared out one of the results from our Chicago biohub. And what they do in Chicago is that they want to understand inflammation. So inflammation is like when your body is irritated, your immune system is out of whack, and like something's wrong. It's like hot. Something's hot in your body. And what they're trying to do in Chicago is they're building these microsensors that can help us understand the ebbs and flow of inflammation. And like you've probably even worn one yourself, like one of those glucose monitors. Okay, so it turns out that measuring glucose is really easy because there's this like hack that you can use. There's an enzyme that triggers and sends a signal when it hits a glucose molecule. So that one's really easy. But what we want to do in the Chicago Biohub is actually measure when different markers of inflammation ebb and flow. Right now, we know when something's inflamed when it's red or you have a fever, like things are really sort of serious and there's a significant swing. What they've done at the Chicago Biohub is they built a tiny, tiny sensor that could go on a little patch. And it has a bit that's kind of like an antibody that can detect very small variations and patterns in the inflammatory markers in your body. And that will give us the ability to say, like, and it sort of shakes it off. So it's not like it's like a yes, no. It gives you the ebbs and flow over time, which is super cool. Because what you can imagine is being able to monitor at the very earliest signs. If you have an autoimmune disease, or you're about to get sick, or your heart is not working properly, you can see the early signs of inflammation. And then you can see whether or not your body is responding to treatment. You could do something. Like, okay, here's a holy shit moment. They tested this.
I just wanted you to say it.
I'm like really I know. I'm like really nerdy about this. But they could see in this monitor when they poked the mouse, the rat. When you put a needle into the rat, the immune system didn't like it and it spiked. And you could see a little tiny spike very reliably, and it would come back down. If you can see that, like, we could actually test things like neurodegeneration. That's inflammation in your brain. Like, what if we could actually see things, like, not wait for end, like, dementia, but we could actually say, wow, when you exercise, use this drug, do this, here's the inflammatory pattern in your brain, and here's how it changes. Like, that's huge. And also, we could actually validate people's experiences with healthcare and medicine. Like, we all have things that our doctors can't explain.
Right.
We're like, when I have milk, I feel this way. And they're like,
Yeah.
But like, we could actually see, like, oh my gosh, that's right.
Right.
What you're reporting, even though it's not in the scientific literature, I can see and understand why you'd be feeling that way.
Right.
And when I saw this, and actually another person brought this up, like, I know this is a Chinese thing, but like, did anyone have grandmas that was like, that's hot, that's
Right.
cold, you can't have that food? Like, there's probably a lot of wisdom in all these things about how our bodies respond that research in medicine has just never been able to capture.
Oh, my Chinese grandmother definitely, for sure, said those things. This is all, you are working on all of these things at a time when scientific research is being defunded, it's being frozen, it's being censored. We have entire databases that have been taken offline based on decisions that the Trump administration has made. You and Mark were at the inauguration. As someone who is playing such a pivotal role in scientific research, do you support this? Is this a good thing?
This is a big one, and I think it's important to zoom back out to understand how, like, all these parts come together for us. So in science and in scientific breakthroughs, no one breakthrough is because of one person or one organization. Every breakthrough is the result of many people's efforts, many organizations' efforts across the scientific ecosystem. And the NIH has a huge role, CZI has a role, many organizations play a role. The NIH does the vast, vast majority of funding in this country. And they, understandably, are a bit more conservative in the way they fund. They want to fund things that have guaranteed results. That's how the NIH works. At CZI, we take riskier bets that take a little bit longer to play out and don't fit into the traditional funding cycle.
Right. You're funding things that the NIH would never fund, right?
It just doesn't fit into their model today.
Yeah.
So at CZI, our work depends on a long-standing history of investment in the American research enterprise. One of the best in the world, but far from perfect. So today, we're waiting to see what the next chapter of the NIH looks like so that we can continue collaborating, building off of, and contributing to, but there's a lot in flux.
So are you, like, for example, have you changed your strategies at all yet based on the signals that you're getting from the federal government? Do you see opportunities where CZI could pick up the baton? are people coming to you and saying, oh my gosh, we just lost XYZ, like, can you step up?
So for us, we find it super important to stay in our lane of like, we've made commitments. When we make commitments, they're 10-year commitments, pretty standard. And so we have stayed stable looking at our investments. And the other thing that like mathematically we have to remember is that CZI is like just about 1% of NIH budget. Like there's no like replacing. And so we just have to wait and see.
So that actually leads me to my next question, because there's of course, there are the critics of big philanthropy that, you know, all this money is going into the system, but sometimes you look at some of the problems are getting worse. Income inequality is by some measures worse than it's been since the Great Depression. What do you think of the critiques of sort of billionaire philanthropy? Like, what is fair and what is not fair?
I think when you think about philanthropy and the critiques on whether or not things are successful, you have to realize that no two organizations are the same. And I think philanthropies is a big catch-all. And the most important thing for an organization is that it understands the scope of the problem it's taking on, it's prioritizing and sort of scoping properly, and it's an organization that learns. Like, there is no way that the first thing you try is going to be correct or right or the home run. And if you do, like, wow, that's amazing. Not my experience. I think the most important thing is to try, probably fail, learn, and like try again. And that's what we try to do at CZI.
Yeah. There's also been a lot of controversy on the pullbacks in DEI, which a lot of which are tied to some of these philanthropic efforts. Meta cut its DEI programs, CZI later cut its DEI programs. Obviously, I know that you have many times in the past talked about how important diversity and representation is to you in the team that you've built and the science that you're funding. Why did you make that decision?
So we've not talked about easy problems today, right? We're working on incredibly hard scientific problems at CZI. And that means that Mark and I need to be building an organization where everyone and anyone who has a passion for science and has the ability to make an impact, they need to be able to come to CZI and do the best work of their lives. Mm-hmm. Like, that is critical to our success and for all of us. And we have made some changes that you've mentioned in the past month in response to the regulatory environment. I want to note that we've honored all of our existing commitments. We have not changed any commitments that we have made. Mm-hmm. And the reality is at CZI, these policies affect a very small percentage of our overall work, mm-hmm. and the rest of our work continues completely unchanged.
Got it. So Mark is your co-founder, your co-CEO, and you know, your husband.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are challenges, obviously, that we all see inherent in the way that CZI and Meta coexist. Meta is a lightning rod for so many things, whether it's vaccines or mental health. How do you guys navigate that tension, and what's his involvement? Like, what does he really care about? And how do you kind of weather the storms that come that way, but not necessarily directly your way?
Look, the thing to remember, and I've learned over the years, is when you're Mark, you're running a company as important to the way that we live our lives and communicate as Meta is, like, you're gonna be part of the conversation. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, like, we get the privilege of building off of the strengths of Meta, and we get to have Mark, who is at the forefront of AI, advising and helping us build tools that make science better. Mm-hmm. Like that. So
you're the doctor, but he has some input. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I Googled large language model about 24 months ago. I'm good now, though. So I think like he brings the ability to build these tools that I think is just such a privilege for us to have.
Yeah. How is the scientific community embracing these tools? Like, are scientists and doctors, do they want AI? Do they want to change? Are they willing to let this technology in and see what it can do, or is there still resistance?
Oh, scientists are tinkerers. They're like, oh, they're at the forefront. Like, they're always trying out new tools, tinkering, testing things out. And if it works, they're going to use it. They're like the most responsive like consumers of technology, right? If it works, they're like, yes. If it doesn't solve a need they have, they're like, no thanks. So it's very pragmatic, and it's been really fun building tools alongside scientists because you get that immediate feedback.
There's a lot of hype and reality when it comes to AI. Larry Ellison said you'll be able to pull out a cancer vaccine in 48 hours. Is that true?
I think we're not quite there because we actually need a lot more information to be able to do generalizable things. Like the data, like I said before, is going to be key for us to be able to build a model from which we can actually ask totally novel questions. I think there are things that are very close to the finish line that we can use AI to like flip us just to the other side and get something done pretty quickly. But those are like specific, clever one-offs. We need to invest more time building the right tools, the right data to be able to get to that generalizable model. We want to be able to ask it like, hey, I have this novel thing happening. What is the right thing to do?
Can you put some timeframes on what we're talking about? Like, is this virtual cell thing going to be real in, is it 5 years, 10 years? Obviously we're moving in that direction, but when does this stuff become real?
Some of it is happening right now, okay? We don't have the like, this is a cell, do whatever you want to it version, but like we at CZI, we've been part of building two models, one called Subcell. Subcell uses a database called the Human Protein Atlas, where it can actually predict how a drug will affect a particular cell. So like that dot has been connected by Subcell. Another one called SCGPT, it actually has brought together the way you look at the molecular basis of a cell in human literature. And so now, again, we have a better understanding of the molecular underpinnings, better than an individual model. And so these models that look at a thinner slice of how a cell works, they already exist, and people are tinkering with them. That's real today. And I bet within the next 3 years, we start moving towards early versions where we're really looking at how a cell works in a sort of like first principles. This is a model of a cell. Test it out. And then that will take more time to get into like you being able to walk into clinic and say, here's the digital version of me. Tell me what to do. But this is not. We were talking backstage about how it's been a long time since I've spoken publicly. I was a little nervous.
You're doing great.
It's because I was like, let's wait until we actually have some results that we're like, this is real. Like, I don't want to be a snake oil salesman up here. Like, this is real. It's happening. There are early versions of this. And it's going to take more time because the models that we have today, they were built off of existing data sets that people had built over the past decade, sometimes 20, 30 years. So it's going to take real acceleration, real effort to get more data sets online to complement the existing ones. So there has to be a real acceleration on data generation, data gathering, in addition to using large language models and fine-tuning what has come online through industry to get to where you want, but the pathway is there.
One thing we've talked about that you've said that really resonated with me is how we need to be more involved in research ourselves in order for the scientific community to get more data. I remember pulling something off the back of a sheet of paper in a bathroom stall that was like, volunteer for this research project. This is 20 years ago. And I got contacted by them 10 years later, and then only recently, 20 years later, they are still at it. And I feel like people, there's just lack of trust. People are just hesitant. We don't have time. How can we help make this happen? Why should we be giving ourselves to research, and how can we trust that they're going to do right by us?
Yeah, this is a big one, and this is an important one. I've talked a lot about like we need to be able to build these data sets, and it is so important for actually all of us to be willing to participate. And I'll talk a little bit about what that might look like, but like if you want the models to see and understand you have to be part of the process. Like, because you are unique. You are a very special combination that, you know, unless you have an identical twin, does not exist, okay? You are you, and you are unique. And if you want to be on, when we get to the after state, and you want the models to understand people like you, and for your health and your uniqueness to be represented, like, we have to all participate. And like, it doesn't mean like you have to enroll in this like very formal, big, giant study, though many people do that. And that is wonderful, and that is a gift to science and a gift to humanity. There's littler versions of that. Like you've called a phone number and you've been in some sort of longitudinal study. Yeah. And you are part of that information and that knowledge we're building. Like if you ever get like a biopsy as part of a medical procedure, or if you are trying a new drug and they're like, can we call you for follow-up? Like, it would be the greatest gift if you asked another question and you considered doing it. Because we need all of us to be part of this, to be part of the data information that's being generated so that we can best take care of us, but really our kids. Like, and so we want our kids' genes, genetics, their needs represented in the after state. We all can play a role in volunteering and being a part of that.
So what does success look like to you? Like, let's say 10 years out. What will be a good 10 years of progress in your view?
Oh, for us at CZI, in 10 years, I want us to, we have 4 somewhat nascent research organizations. One of them is a lot further ahead. But I think in 10 years, like, they should be just humming and doing a great job in actually defining these big long-term research projects. And people are coming from all different sectors. I think the thing that's unique about our research institutes, the biohubs, is that it's not a single lab and it's not a single discipline. People come together from all different disciplines to work on a singular grand challenge over a long period of time. And so being able to put together those teams to solve these big problems, they should be really mature in that point. And we should be an organization that can look at new problems in 10 years and say, that's a great fit for the biohub model. We want to do that. We want to do more of that. And we're also working as a network within ourselves and with partners to build tools that scientists find indispensable. We're not building tools just for ourselves. We want every scientist to have access to great tools, and if we're the only ones using it, that's not a win. We want academics to use our tools. We want pharma to use our tools. We want big companies in medicine using our tools, because we want to build something so indispensable that scientists, I told you they're pragmatic. They vote with their feet. Like, we want them to say, this is helpful. We want to be a part of building and making these tools better.
You and Mark have said you're going to give away, is it all of your wealth in your lifetime? The majority of your wealth?
The majority of it.
The majority of your wealth in your lifetime. So let's go 50 years out or 60 years out. Like, we're going to live longer as a result of all of this, right?
Maybe. Definitely our kids.
So what does success look like at the end of, the end of your resources and when you have given everything that you have to give?
I think success looks like having tried on a few really big, audacious things, and we will have failed at some of them, but we really will have hit the mark on a few of them. And that we continue to expand people's imagination of what's exciting and possible. Like, I'm here, I'm doing this work, one, because I want for things to be better, and because I know I'm not the only one that's necessary to be doing this work. I want other people to be inspired to do the version many years down the line that it won't be for me. I will hopefully be retired and, I don't know, playing pickleball somewhere. But to inspire others to say, yeah, that big audacious goal, like, let's do it. And hopefully it'll be our kids, my kids. That would be a dream. But I want people to approach the world in a hopeful way, and to take on, say crazy things like you want to cure, prevent, or manage all disease, and try to make good on your word.
How do you decide on the big audacious bets? I'm curious what the debates are within, but like, that's too risky, or no, let's do it. Like, what is it that makes you say we're going to shoot for that moon?
We're not as crazy as you think. Because we look for things that are like, if you just use logic, you understand how things will come together, and some of the pieces are there, and we work with smart people. I think we'll look at something and say, whoa, that looks cool. And then we talk to a lot of people, and we look around, and you're like, you think that's okay? You good? You in on this one? Or it's like, it's good if they're like, yeah, that seems reasonable. It's really good if they're like, yeah, and I'll come work on that. And so I think it's testing all those things. And I think the really hard part is like, things aren't, it's really fun on the like ups, like everything is possible part. It's less fun when it's like nothing's working yet part. But the key is getting through that, and start to get the flywheel going on like, oh, this is going to go somewhere. There are legs under this.
What's your day-to-day, between the wake surfing and the pickleball? I mean, I know you're in the trenches.
Yeah, I run CZI day to day, and I have learned so much because we went through my life history a little bit at the beginning, but my job prior to running CZI was I just finished residency, and so when we were building up CZI, I knew about the science part. But people were like, we need to build an HR department. I was like, what's that? No one cared about me in residency. And so I've learned a lot about building the organization, like leaning in on sort of like what we're going to work on, prioritizing, making hard calls. And right now it's really fun because we've got a little bit of wind at our back, and we're working on incredibly exciting work.
So what do you want your legacy to be?
Oh, what do I want my legacy to be? It's going to be the work, and it's going to be the kids. So hopefully they're more reasonable than they are today.
All right, that was wonderful, Priscilla. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.